You're watching FanTeam Daily, a podcast by WhoScored.com. Hello and welcome to FanTeam Daily, the fantasy football show that could help you win real money with your football knowledge. On FanTeam Daily, we'll be looking at the record-breaking Euro 2020 fantasy football tournament, which has a minimum guaranteed prize pool of £1 million and a guaranteed first place prize of £200,000. Time to introduce my lovely panel. First up, we've got Who Scored very own Jake Gallagher. How are you, Jake? Good weekend?
Yeah, good, thank you. Very good weekend. I watched England play. A bit of a drab affair. I'm going to take Ben's advice and not look at the performance and the result too much, because it's just a friendly.
Still coming home?
It's coming home. It's coming home, guys.
And with us again, we've got a bastion of the fantasy football community, Ben Dinnery. How are you, Ben?
Yeah, well, as cracking, mate. Absolutely cracking.
Excellent. And we've also got Josh, who I'm going to explain who he is in a little bit more detail in a sec, because he is, he's a very happy chap at the moment, and I'll explain why in a second. But first, what is FanTeam Daily? What is this show about? FanTeam have a Euro 2020 fantasy football game. As I said, the guaranteed prize pool is £1 million. It's just £20 to enter, and you can enter multiple teams. So you can try lots of different strategies out across the board. The game is similar to FPL. So if you play that, you'll probably know how to play FanTeam. There's a couple of different rules, and we'll explain those as we go. And in particular today, we're going to be talking strategy and some of the differences between the games. Jake, do you want to give us a bit more detail as to what's coming up?
Sure. So overall, FanTeam Daily is a 5-part series. This is actually the 4th episode of 5. So if this is the first one you're watching on YouTube today, please go back and take a look at the others. What episodes 1, 2, and 3 we've looked at essential options where Ben and I argued over Eden Hazard. We looked at some budget options where we agreed on how good Thomas Souček is, and then we've also assembled the perfect squad based on Who Scores pair ratings. So some really good stuff in there. Today's show we're looking at strategy and how to win this game. And later on in the show, we're going to be giving away some free entries. So keep your eyes and ears peeled, as always, for that one.
Amazing. Right. Come on, let's get on with the show. I bet the suspense is killing anyone who doesn't know who Josh is. So you mentioned, Jake, about winning the game. I don't need to mention again, first prize is £200,000. Now, I'm with someone today who knows what it's like to win that much money, knows what it is to win FanTeam. So we're joined with Josh Wooldridge, who won the FanTeam Premier League season-long game from last season. Josh, how are you doing?
I've been worse, as thanks very much.
Is there any money left, or have you spent it all? That's the main question. There's a plenty left. Yeah, there's still plenty left. So thankfully, the fact you had to pause for a second before you said that worried me a little bit.
I was just checking it. I was checking if my girlfriend was in the room or not. That's all. It's all good.
So I guess the key question is how did you win that much money? How did you win FanTeam? What was your strategy?
Well, I think
you don't even know, do you?
It was no, exactly. I think at the start, because it's such a new game, as you all know, I think I've only played for 1 year. I believe it was only running for another year before that, in terms of having a season-long game or whatever. I think what happened was a lot of people thought it was exactly the same as FPL, and as you've already alluded to, there's some slight nuances in the rules, which I think, because I actually bothered to read the rules at the start of the season, I think I got a bit ahead at the start, and then because I think everyone had quite similar teams, it was almost as if I got ahead and then just stayed ahead in a way. I think that was a real key part of it. But another bit was I just didn't punt the captaincy. I just picked Bruno, Salah or Harry Kane every week as my captain. I think it sounds simple, but it really paid off on a game like FanTeam.
Yeah, is that what you're going to do in the Euro game as well? Just keep the captains really safe. Don't look for that kind of massive, because I guess it's even more important, right, with a game that's got so few weeks.
I think in an international game, there's more options. There's more world-class players in the tournament. So I think there is a lot more options. I think in the Premier League game, I think if you're picking the safe or the highest owned captain, you almost know who it's going to be every week. I think on the Euros game, I think there is a bit more scope that it might be someone a bit different to who I perceive it to be anyway. I guess we can talk about more specific weeks a bit later on, I'm sure. But
yeah, so you mentioned there's some differences between the like FPL and that, because I mean it's a bit like they say when you do an exam, always read like the exam question like 3 or 4 times to make sure you've got it. I guess that's like, I mean, I played it last year. I didn't read the rules. I had no idea what I was doing. I got off to a terrible start and I kind of gave up. So I was the complete opposite of you. Whereas this year I'm looking to take it more seriously. So it definitely starts with that. So what would you say the kind of key differences are between the two games?
Well, yeah, you would have been on your own there, in terms of people who just wanted to have a bit of fun with it. Just put your it was €25 last year, wasn't it? Just put your €25 in and just sort of pick a team that you think might be fun or look good or whatever. The main key difference for me in last year was the impact points, which is you get 1 for winning for the time the player's on the pitch, or you lose 1 point if the player loses while he's on the pitch. So that was a key thing from last year. I believe they've changed that now for the Euros and beyond. So I think it's been slightly brought down, hasn't it? I believe to like 0.3 points or something. But the main thing that's still in play is the 90-minute rule for the attackers and midfield players. So on FanTeam, you get an extra point if you complete the 90 minutes if you're a midfield player or an attacker, which automatically your mind must be thinking, it favours the likes of, like, on the Premier League game, James Ward-Prowse, Jack Grealish, Wilfried Zaha, compared to the likes of Gareth Bale or Man City attackers, for example, because they obviously find it more challenging to complete 90 minutes in their
so
squad.
Did you avoid players who weren't kind of guaranteed to get 90 minutes in?
I did, yeah, for most of the season, actually, especially in the midfield. I packed the midfield with 5 players who I thought were going to get 90 minutes. The aforementioned Tommy Souček was another key one that was 38 times 90 minutes, I think he got. Because
you look around some of the squads, like, you know, people investing in teams like the Ukraine, in Sweden, it's hard to know who the kind of sure starters are in quite a lot of these teams. So that's really interesting, because that's not something I'd really considered, but making sure that you've got players who play 90 minutes or at least have a very good chance of playing 90 minutes are that important. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think my strategy is going to, for the Euros, if we're going to start talking about that, I think I'm going to pick players who I'm pretty certain at least are the talisman for their country, so they've got like a really good chance of getting the 90 minutes, you know what I mean? Nice. So it's always good to look at captains as well, like the captains of the nations and clubs. It sounds simple, but if they're the captain, they're quite unlikely to get subbed a lot of the time, aren't they? So I think that can be a good strategy if they've got some attacking potential as well.
That's great. Yeah. I'll open the floor up. Ben?
Yeah, Josh, I mean, I'm under some serious pressure from the wife, to win big. To satisfy this fantasy addiction that I've got. So what are some of maybe the key principles or key pieces of advice would you say for those looking to assemble their squads ahead of, that kickoff in the Euros?
So for me on FanTeam, I think the least valuable position is defence. So I think it's really good to play 3 at the back on FanTeam. In general, I think you can obviously, especially in the weekly games, you can go differential by picking 4 or 5 defenders. I think that's often a really sneaky way to get a differential 11. But in general, I think that the formation that's going to get the most points is either 3-5-2 or 3-4-3 definitely, which is almost like what it was for FPL 5 years ago, for example, or whatever, whereas now big at the backs came a bit more into it. But on FanTeam, I definitely favour cheaper defenders and play as few defenders as possible is my
Why is
my
that?
favourite thing, because they, especially with the impact points, that they it seems like they're most harshly treated, and also the lack of bonus points on FanTeam rather is a massive difference for defenders, because say Stuart Dallas gets a goal and a clean sheet in a game, on FPL he'd be almost guaranteed 15 points, whereas on FanTeam, if he got the impact +1, he'd only get 13. So every haul you sort of like shortchange by 2 points almost.
And they don't get the 90 minutes, right?
Yeah, they don't get the 90 minutes, and also if they lose 1-0, then the defender automatically only gets 1 point because he loses 1 for impact, or that was what it was like in last season's game rather anyway. They just seem to be quite harshly treated. Like that defender would get 2 points on FPL, so again you're losing a point, you know what I mean? You're not quite getting value for the position, I don't think. Whereas a midfielder on FanTeam, if he doesn't do anything and plays 90 minutes in a 1-0 win, he gets 5 points. Whereas on FPL he'd only get 3 points. So I just think you want as many of those attackers on the pitch as possible, really.
That's real. What about goalkeepers?
So obviously I think I've got to mention my boy Edison at this point, because he was the difference in winning me the game actually in game week 38. It was a crazy selection I went for on my week 36 wild card, but it really paid off in the final week with that rather fortunate haul he got. But I do like expensive goalkeepers, especially if you think their team's going to win quite a lot, because obviously those impact points do tot up over the season. Edison was the top scoring goalkeeper on FanTeam, I think. I don't think he was anywhere near on FPL. I think
in FPL then.
Yeah, I think he was third or fourth on FPL, I think, from memory. But he was first on FanTeam, which is bizarre to me, considering how few saves he made compared to someone like Martinez.
Because I've got 2 4 million goalkeepers currently. Do you think I should be investing a bit more?
So interestingly, I think you can go one end or the other. So I started the season last year with Carl Darlow and Meslier in all 12 of my teams that I entered in the Premier League game. So I actually had the same 8 million total on the 2 goalkeepers, and it did prove really, really good. But I think you need to make sure they're the right ones if you're going to go for the cheap ones. You want a nice rotation of at least semi-decent fixtures, which, to be fair, on the Euros game, I think there is some available, to be honest. But I also like the Italian goalkeeper, Donnarumma. I really like him for the game, so I think that's another option.
So you mentioned about sort of goalkeepers. So we'll stay with goalkeepers first. I want to know what kind of players you've got your eye on, what players you think are going to do quite well in the Euros. So in terms of, you mentioned Donnarumma there being an expensive goalkeeper. What about cheap goalkeepers? And then what about in other positions? What players do you think are absolute bargains?
I think there's some really good cheap goalkeepers actually. So I think Bachmann yesterday was confirmed as the Austrian starting goalkeeper. That seems like he's got 2 really nice fixtures in the group stage. So especially the first one against North Macedonia. So I think I really like that one. And then someone to rotate in with. I think the Russian goalkeeper Shunin is also 4 million. He's got a decentish fixture in the second week, so he rotates really nicely with the Austrian goalkeeper.
That's not my goalkeepers. That's a shame.
No, I know. I think obviously Martin Dubravka. Obviously, shout out to Ben there.
He's one of them. Yeah.
But he's 4 million. You can't go wrong with him. I'm sure he'll get a lot of saves. I'm not sure they'll win many games, but. He's a really nice backup for Donnarumma, especially. So I think if you are going for Donnarumma, Dubravka's the best backup, actually, just as someone who's reliable, who I know will play all 3 games, who's 4 million. So,
So what about in defence and then kind of further up the pitch?
Yeah, my favourite he's sort of in the middle, I guess. He's 5 million. David Alaba's my favourite defender on the game for sure. As I said, they've got the 2 good fixtures. I really like the double up with Bachmann as the goalkeeper, actually, because I think a defensive double up on a game like this where there's not too many weeks could be a really nice way to sort of get lucky with a clean sheet or 2 in a way, and try and make a bit of ground on some of the other people. He's also playing on the left wing for Austria, and they looked pretty defensively sound against England actually. I think it was on Tuesday, wasn't it? So I don't mind that as a pick at all.
He's in every one of my teams.
Yeah, I really like him actually.
I think we had a bit of an argument, Jake, Ben, and I, about Alaba because.
Oh, did you?
he's kind of being shifted out of position a bit, isn't he? He's on the left wing, not so effective there. Austria a bit of a funny side, but I just like an out of position pick, even if they're rubbish, Yeah,
I don't think 5 million's bad. I think on FanTeam I do tend to go for the more attacking defenders. I think it's nice to have the 2 ways at the points, especially, which is obviously the same on any fantasy game, to be honest. But I think that he's genuinely got threat at both ends. So I think you could catch two returns, either a defensive one or an attacking one over the 3 games, which for 5 million, that's more than enough, isn't it? I think. I also saw the German wing back. I think he's playing Gosens. I think I noticed he played again tonight or last night. 5.5. That seems like a really good price for a German defender. They've got a tough group, but again, very attacking position wing back. So I don't mind paying that for a German defender. I don't think. Back. Yeah, and then if you want to go for the double up with Donnarumma, I think we get the lineup for Italy, don't we? Because it's the first game, so I'm going to be probably pivoting on an Italy defender. But I think if Spinarosa's starting, I think that's going to be the one I go for. If not, I think you can pivot to Bonucci for the same price. So I think I really like both of those as well.
You mentioned, Josh, there a couple of players that I've not considered actually. How important is a differential in this game? It's only 7 game weeks. It's not like the 38 game week period where sort of a template could win you it. In 7 game weeks, differential could be more important?
I think I've already alluded to it, actually. I think I'm going to target differentials at the back, actually, to try and be the way that I differentiate. I think for me, I don't want to take the shot against some of the attackers that I just genuinely think are the best picks in some of the attacking positions, at least. I think there's some scope to take a few punts in midfield, especially, but I think defensive double-ups and triple-ups are going to be the way I differentiate, actually. I'm going to really try and be aggressive with my defence.
It's quite ironic. You say, don't invest too much in the defence, but actually it's probably the defence in where you could win or lose it if the template sort of does quite well. So I like that, because that implies that you've got to do your research. You've got to find those bargains. You've got to find those gems in defence to really make the difference.
I think it could be some budget defenders that win the game on this, genuine. I think it could be like really a defence that costs average 5 million or 4.5 million, that if they do get lucky and get 2 clean sheets in the first 3 group games, obviously it's worth bearing in mind, I believe it's a forced wild card in game week 4, isn't it? So you can regroup at that point almost, and adjust your strategy, go even more punty if you need to, which I think to be honest, because as Jake said, it's a 7-week game, we'll have to go really punty at that point, but in order to try and win it anyway. It depends what your ambitions are, obviously, but I think it's going to be interesting. We get 3 weeks of data, obviously. It's going to be fun to wildcard, I think, but also quite manic with multiple teams. So
this is such good advice, but it's making me want to tear up every single draft I've made and just start all over again. So we've mentioned that the kind of main difference between FanTeam and the Premier League is probably the fact that you're not just allowed multiple teams, but encouraged to have multiple teams. I guess my question is, so I've got 5 teams at the moment. I'm a little bit reluctant to put any more money in, but obviously I sense that with every extra entry you get, the more chance you get, the more lottery tickets you buy, all of that. How many teams did you put in for the Premier League game, and how many are you looking to put in for the Euros?
So I had 12 teams in the Premier League game, as I've mentioned to other people before. I think I paid for about 8 of them. I think FanTeam gave me 4 for free. But based on various buy one get one free offers and stuff like that, so that softened the blow a little bit, because I'm the same as you, as I wouldn't have wanted to invest so much money as like €300 it would have been if I'd have paid for all of them. So so I think it was nice to get a bit of a discount or whatever, but I think you've hit the nail on the head. The more lottery tickets you buy, the more chance you have of winning the lottery, I suppose. So
I'm guessing you're not being so tight this time around, that you're gonna be putting a lot of teams in, right?
No, I left a little bit of the winnings in my FanTeam account, so there's enough to put a few entries into this year, and I'm quite excited to do so, actually, because it's a really nice structure on FanTeam, isn't it? So I think the deadline's like every 5 days or something, so we can still enjoy the football as much as we want to in between, but then sort of just be able to play the game properly and do a little bit of research and watch loads of football mainly. So yeah.
Because there's other fantasy games, but they're much more. You've got to be much more active in changing your captains every day and changing your subs and all that. Whereas with FanTeam, that's the main similarity of FPL, is that it's just set and forget, right? You can just do your team and then leave it. So yeah, I do like that element to it. The thing I'm really excited about now is you talk about teams. We've got a team from you. This is the squad that you're most optimistic about. So I can't wait to see. There's going to be some great picks in here. So talk me through the team that you've got set up at the moment. And there's a couple of interesting picks in there, especially, there's a couple in midfield that kind of caught my eye. But talk me through it and tell me why you like some of these players.
Sure, no problem. So obviously I've gone for the aforementioned Donnarumma in goal. I think I've already talked enough about him, so we'll move on from there. I've got Rodriguez from Switzerland. I think there's a lot of these 4.55 million defenders. A lot of them, I think, ironically, have good fixtures in weeks 2 and 3. So as you can see, Barisic on the bench, for example, and Selik from Turkey. They're both more cheap. They're 4 and 4.5 respectively, but I really like their fixtures for like weeks 2 and 3, actually. So I'm sort of stashing them on the bench as a potential rotation. So in the Rodriguez spot that I've put down, I think I might only play him in game week 1 even. I think penalty taking defender, I think he is. I mean, seems like a good pick again for the attacking purposes. Wales aren't exactly a really attacking team, so we might get lucky with a clean sheet there.
And
as
a lot
well.
of people going for Bale because he's so cheap, right? So you're kind of backing the opposite of that with
in this particular team. I've completely gone against that exactly. There's no sight of Bale anywhere. Although I do think he's a really good pick if you're going against this on the other side. Alaba, I've already talked about. Love him. Spinazzola to go for the Italian double up. I think that might be a nice double up that not everyone might have. I think their defence will be popular, but maybe people will only go for one or something. So I'm hoping that will be the case. The Dutch pivot in midfield of Wijnaldum and Depay. I think Memphis Depay is an amazing pick, to be honest. I absolutely love him. Obviously out of position again, as you talked about before with Alaba. Wijnaldum, I'm not so sure about. He's been playing a little bit more deep recently, but I do like the odd attacking double up as well, so I don't mind that as the two Netherlands picks. Gnabry again out of position. I really like him. I don't think he's everyone's cup of tea actually, so I think that might be a sneaky differential for me that I'm willing to just back to the end sort of thing.
I think a lot of people are going against Germany because of those two first fixtures. But I mean, if they did, I kind of wrote them off, and then I looked at their squad. And I thought, good God, they've got a good squad.
He's still out of position. And I do think France and Portugal might finish first and second in that group. I think that could well happen. I think that those are the two I would pick, actually. But there's no reason why Gnabry can't get a couple of goals. And interestingly, I like Gnabry because he has a good week 3 fixture. Now, I think my strategy on most of my teams is going to be to roll in game week 2. I think I'm going to try and do that across the board if I can, if there's no huge injuries. So I think I'm going to have enough to deal with in game week 3, really, because I think a lot of people might get rotated or rested in that third fixture if the team's already through. So I think I'm going to have some problems with the likes of Lukaku if Belgium are already through, for example. They might give Benteke or Batshuayi a game, haven't they? So I think, ironically, because Germany have got those two fixtures, they might have to win in the third week to try and get through. So I think Gnabry might be more nailed than anyone else in my team, to be honest. Maybe the same as Ronaldo because he's in the same group, for example. So
he's really looking ahead.
Yeah, I know. Well, we only have to think about 3 weeks, so it's good to think about all three of them, isn't it? I suppose. But I like Christian Eriksen. I think Denmark are quite an underrated good team. 7 million's a really nice price for him, I think. And then Lukaku and Kane, I'm pretty sure a lot of people / maybe everybody will have those two. I'm not sure, but I think they're great picks. 90 minutes, both on penalties. I think I like it. Lukaku might not be on penalties if Hazard starts, but I think you've already debated about Hazard enough, so we might have to leave that one, I think.
Ben's boy.
And then Cristiano Ronaldo captain. I've got one of the best 2 players in the world. I'm happy to have him against Hungary. So there we go.
He's captain in pretty much every one of mine. I just can't see him not getting a goal against Hungary, at least one. So yeah, and then your bench is really cheap. So Dubravka, you've got 4 million, Yaziki 4.5, Selic at 4, Barisic at 4.5. So you've obviously got those Turkey players and those Croatian players in for those kind of game week 2 and game week 3 fixtures, which I think is a really good idea. I think a lot of people will forget about that and probably just set their game, have a really good game week 1 side, and then look at their team in game week 2 and 3. Because in one of my teams, I've put a load of France players on the bench, because then obviously they come in with Hungary in the match week 2, and then I can bring them in for some of my players who have a rough fixture. So I think it is really important to think ahead to those other games.
That's a really nice differential strategy you just talked about, actually, with the French guys on the bench. I think that's really interesting. In general on FanTeam, I try and put as little money on the bench as possible. I think FanTeam make the prices, they have done on the season-long game and this game anyway, where there's some very affordable picks that are also very good sneaky picks. Like, I think there's plenty of 4 and 4.5 midfield million players who I think could come into your teams in weeks 2 and 3, or could even start in week 1, for example. I think you could even put Grant Hanley or someone like that for Scotland, 4 million for the first game. I think he's got Czech Republic. That could be a sneaky miracle clean sheet or something. You know what I mean? So there's they're very generous with some of the
clean sheet. Very harsh.
They're very no, only because of Thomas Souček, of course, that you guys love, obviously. But
who doesn't?
No, I think they're quite generous with some of the pricing, and that does bring a lot of players into play that you wouldn't even normally consider, to be honest. So,
Josh, that is awesome. Ben, Jake, any more questions for the champ? I've genuinely learned loads from that. I'm quite excited.
I mean, I think for me, Josh, and what you said, something about, the last point you made, maybe targeting those first two games, that fits nicely with Az's golden rule. And we're referred to it, you make hay while the sun shines. Because if teams are getting back-to-back victories, then yes, you can see heavy rotation. For me, that makes somebody like Lewandowski at 9 million almost an even essential pick, because I'm not expecting Poland to go out and steamroll, and they could be forced to play in that third game, and that might what you've just sort of reaffirmed to me, that somebody like him, he could be an essential pick in my squad.
I've got him in a few.
I've got him in quite a few. Yeah,
under the radar, Lewandowski. Yeah.
I love him. He's obviously a world-class striker, as you know. I mean, I saw his stat. He got 41 goals last year, I think. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, I think he's scored a goal a game for the last 6 years or something. He's an absolutely obscene striker. But he's in a lot of mine, and they've particularly got a good game in the first week, haven't they? Have they got Slovakia in the first week? Is that right? I think they do. I really like that for Lewandowski. I think he's a captain option. I think he's a genuine captain option.
Just to finish us off then, Josh, one player who get the most points in this game.
We got to back the England boys, Harry Kane. I have to go for Harry Kane.
Joke will be happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I mean, he should do, right? He should get loads of goals, take loads of shots. We should win the group fairly comfortably. Come on, fingers crossed.
In this kind of game, it's just like you have to pick the guy. You have to try and pick a guy for the most points. Anyway, it's probably going to be someone who goes really far in the tournament. So there's a bit of like an England bias there, definitely. But we'll see. Fingers crossed. Anyway, boys.
Josh, that's awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, let's hope you can win some more money in the Euro tournament as well.
But not all of it.
Yeah, save some for us.
For the minnows.
Thanks very much, Az. Thanks.
Fantastic,
guys.
Josh. Much appreciated, mate. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Mate, I mean, how good was that? We had the Premier League FanTeam winner talking to us about strategies, talking us through his team. He's good, isn't he? You can tell he didn't win it just through fluke. He knows his stuff.
Absolutely. I think he's done his research. I think he knows how many times he's picked Robert Lewandowski. I think he. I think he. Has a lot. I mean, I'm going to rip up a few of my teams.
Yeah.
After I've listened to him, there's a couple of names actually he mentioned that I've not considered, which was nice. And also, what I quite like is there's a key focus on picking players who are going to hit 90 minutes, but also that risk element of trying to get someone who's a bit of a differential. And that's what I think I'm going to like particularly about this game in picking my squads.
Yeah. So, I mean, he mentioned the Italian double up at the back, for example. I've got a team with 3 Italy at the back to try and tap into that, exactly like what he said. It was nice to see that there were quite a few players he mentioned that I've got in quite a few of my drafts. I am thinking of changing some stuff up based on what he said, and in particular thinking more about game weeks 2 and game weeks 3, because I've got that France team, but I am a bit worried now that my other squads I haven't really taken into account, like the fixtures that are coming in those 2 match weeks. So I'm going to have to take a closer look at that, I think. Ben, what do you think?
Fantastic. Absolutely loved it, first and foremost. And for me, I mean, I was a big player of the FanTeam Monster last season, and that suited my sort of strategy and style of play in terms of the game. And that was elements of that game which sort of Josh touched upon. I have been known as differential dinnery, and I was targeting those cheap defenders. And he mentioned looking at specific games and specific fixtures and just bringing those players in for those one games. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think one of those was Rodriguez, where he mentioned he may only play in that opening round in fixture. So again, it's just about adopting and changing that mindset and cherry picking selections. And I think it's a great bit of advice, because sometimes when you're maybe playing a season-long game, you're thinking, well, if I do bring him in and he doesn't return in a week or 2 weeks, well, I've brought him in based on maybe a projected score over 4, 5 or 6 weeks. Well, we haven't got it in this very short format. We've got 7 game weeks. So I think, looking at those fixtures and thinking, right, well, actually, this team I think is going to do well on this fixture, and this player inherently should, return. I think that's a great piece of advice.
One of the lessons from FPL is it doesn't really matter if your team on paper doesn't look amazing for that week, because you've got longer for those teams to make up the ground. But because it's only 7 game weeks, because we get a wild card after the group stages anyway, every game matters so much. So I think your team has to look almost perfect on paper every week, just so you can kind of keep up or get ahead of other people. So really put like no chips. So you can't triple captain a player. You can't do all the things that we use to kind of try and make up ground. So you've really got to attack each week hard and make sure you're well set up for each week. That's kind of what I took from that.
The mention of Rodriguez. So I had Rodriguez in my team, but I had no thought about not playing him for game weeks 2 and 3. But now I think you look at this, the Swiss actually travel the furthest out of all the teams in this competition, with it being over different countries. They travel between Rome and Baku. That's 5-hour flight over 2 time zones. You might be onto something here. Play them in that first game when they're not knackered. Then bring Rodriguez out. There could be a team to target after that with all that travel too.
Yeah, nice. No, I like that a lot. So in terms of some of the rule changes, there is a couple of rule changes, but a couple of some of the rule differences. Some of the key differences that I know compared to FPL that people might not be so used to. So there's -2 points for a player conceding a penalty, which is a rule I really like. So I mean, it's not often nice to be punished in that way, but it kind of makes sense. But also, it doesn't even matter if that penalty is scored, right? If you bring down a player in the box and it's a penalty awarded, it's -2. So that's, again, he mentions defenders and not prioritising them, playing 4 at the 5 at the back. Well, you've got more chance of conceding a penalty for a defender you've got in your squad. So it's another reason why you shouldn't maybe be investing so much money in your back line. And the same with -2 points for a player conceding a free kick that leads to a direct goal. So again, it's kind of punishment for defenders, right? Does that change the way you think about defenders, Ben, in this game? Are you going ultra cheap?
I mean, it's almost like it's Kevin Keegan, isn't it? We'll just go all out attack. We'll put with Darren Peacock, so we might have a Philip Albert there at the back, but inherently we're going to spend all the cash up top. And look, I think it's, for me as well, it's rewarding to try and. Yes, the Harry Kanes, the Eden Hazards, the Lukaku, the obvious picks, the great picks in the return, and that's fantastic, high ownership. But for me as well, I take a lot from digging out those cheap bargain differentials. And as we've all alluded to and discussed in great depth, there are a lot of those defenders around. I think there's a lot of players to go around. I am sweet on that Italian defence. They've had a great build up to the tournament, but almost because they've been so good and they're bound to attract a lot of interest, I'm even thinking about, well, do I want to stay? I want to spar wide of that back line, and I want to look elsewhere. I want a differential. I don't want to be, if you're going, I don't want to be a sheep. I want to stand out, and I maybe want to save a few quid.
You said it yourself.
Yeah, look, and really that's what floats my boat. And as an effective strategy for the monster, which isn't too different to this game, it was very successful for me. Never the big prize, never a 6-figure return, but a lot of cash returns, a high percentage of cash returns every week.
Jake, defenders?
Yes, I like the -2 for both of those two, doing things badly as a defender. It adds a bit of jeopardy to the game. I quite like that. Although it does really hurt when a player gets an own goal and it's your player. That does hurt. It's a knife to the heart. But it's a good way of just sort of differentiating all the teams too, because a lot of people will be going for the same players. So the -2 for the Calamity Jones at the back, it'll be needed to keep us all. It'll be all different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and FanTeam have recently added some new rules. So a shot on target, we've mentioned in other episodes, is now rewarded. So you get 0.4 points for any shot that a player has that's on target. So it doesn't matter who blocks it, if it's a goalkeeper, an opposing player, even if it's their own teammate. So players that take lots of shots and more accurate shots are going to be rewarded. So the likes of Depay, the likes of Kane, you mentioned Insigne from Italy. He was took some of the most shots, I think, in Europe, you said, last season as well. So these are players who I think are going to really hoover up the points.
Rodriguez as well. I think he was 2.79 shots per 90.
So 0.6 defenders. Yeah, defenders get 0.6, so they get even more for a shot on target as well. Goalkeepers get 1. It's a shame Alisson isn't playing. And the other rule change I noticed was it's currently, so Josh mentioned 1 point for a win, -1 for a loss. They've changed that now. So now it's plus 0.3 for a win and minus 0.3 for a loss. So they've softened that a little bit, because I think one of the reasons why they've done that is it would kind of make the likes of Slovakia players and Hungary players and players even less attractive if you know you're almost certainly going to lose a point in 1 or 2 of the games. So I quite like that rule change for this tournament in particular, because it just kind of makes me think that it's not completely ridiculous to get in some of the lower ranked nation sides. I think the most interesting thing that I took from Josh was about the appearance points. I'm really going for players who are guaranteed to play 90 or close to guaranteed for 90. Jake, did that change your feelings towards that?
Well, I've been banging the 90-minute drum on this podcast all week, so it's not going to change my strategy there, but it really hammers it home.
It's also like you read the rules.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if you've got 7 attacking players and they're all getting 90 minutes, that's 7 points before you've done anything.
Yep.
And if you can get that out of 2 of the 3 game weeks, for sure, that's 14, and that's a great start. Really, you're propelled above the rest already. So definitely, and it's a good point Josh mentions about the captaincy and the armband on players, not necessarily on the game, but in the actual real life captains. They rarely come off, do they? Let's face it.
Yep, absolutely. Ben, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I heard Joe talk about it, and maybe that just rams it home. How important it could be. You're talking about a team. You mentioned 7 players on for 90 minutes, and if they win, there's 14 points. So if you pick a couple from some of the big hitters, that's a great start to any game week.
So I mentioned to Josh about obviously having multiple teams, talking about buying lottery tickets, and the more teams you've got, maybe the more chance you've got of winning it. I mentioned that I've got 5. Jake, how many teams are you entering into this tournament?
I'm just going to go for 2 teams, me. Keep it nice and simple. I can clearly differentiate between the 2 then. I'm going to have a safe side, players who I think is going to play 90 minutes every time, nailed on players, the Kanes, Lukaku's, Ronaldo's. It'll be very template, but that's fine. And my aim of that team is to get into that top 10,000, earn my money back, and I'm very pleased with that. And then I've got a differential team, and in that team I'm taking a few more punts, and with that team I hope to go a little bit higher in that 10,000 place. And if those punts and those differentials come off, then I could see myself a little bit higher, and that'd be nice.
I really like that idea of having the 2 for the 2 different strategies. I mean, I've gone for 5 just to experiment with different strategies as well. So I mentioned having triple Italy in one. I'm doing the France thing in another one. Like I really do like that element of it. But really, you could easily just have one team and just build like a good solid side of players and really focus on that. You could do what you're doing with 2. It's nice that you kind of have the flexibility to kind of have as many teams in as you want. You can play with 1, you can play with 5, you can do kind of whatever works for you. And obviously, it is a form of gambling, so gamble responsibly and don't overstretch yourself. But it does give you an opportunity to try out different strategy if you'd like to. Ben, how about you? How many teams are you going in with?
Yeah, I'll be plugging for 3, and there's 2 main reasons as to why. First and foremost, the chances of cashing out on FanTeam around about 1 in 8. So 3 teams, that gives me more of an opportunity to win at least my money back and hopefully a little bit more. And I've got a slightly different strategy in terms of my team selection. I'll probably have the same nucleus of maybe 6 or 7 players in every team, and then it'll be those fringe players that will differ between them all. The data hasn't been great from that European qualifying period. We're 12 and 13 months down the line. We've had these non-competitive games. Yes, we've had some World Cup qualifiers, to glean a little bit of insight. But I think until that tournament kicks off and we have a little bit of eyes on, there's still a lot of unknowns there for me. So I think, like I say, I've got those 6 or 7 players nailed down, and then I'll populate the rest with teams who I think and players who I think will do quite well in this tournament and hopefully cover all the bases.
Well, that segues us beautifully into my final question for you both, which is around differentials. Because I think we both agree that having a kind of a strong nucleus and then picking kind of these talisman players, 90-minute players are the way to go. But we need to make sure we've sprinkled in some players who are a little bit different than maybe people aren't considering, that we can get ahead. So Ben, let's come to you first. Who's your who do you think could be a really good differential for people building their teams?
I mean, really good for me, and I'm expecting ownership to be quite low. I'm drawn towards Portugal. It's Bruno and Ronaldo. So for me, I'm looking at Bernardo. Over these last 15 competitive games for Portugal, I think he's had something like 12 goal involvements. If you look across the top 5 leagues of Europe, on all of the key metrics, attacking metrics, touches in the box, he's in that top, 1 to 5%. And he's a player that could absolutely bang. 8 million, he's $1 million less than Bruno and a couple of million less than Ronaldo. So, for me, I know it's a tough group, but I do really, really like Bernardo.
And Jake, who have you got?
So I've gone for someone I mentioned before, actually, Peter Zielinski, Polish guy. I think he'll be lowly owned, and he plays for Napoli. He's been around the block, good footballer, 10 assists in the Serie A last season. We mentioned also if Lewandowski is going to score the goals we expect him to score, someone's got to tee him up. But Napoli weren't in the Champions League last season. I just think that's one of the reasons why he might be lowly owned. He just won't be in people's radar. And it's a good player as well. The other reason why I think he might be lowly owned, and I've done a little bit of detective work here, there's a UEFA official fantasy game. I won't be playing it this year. What I have done is I've had a look at the ownership, and Zielinski's made 2% on there, which is very much differential. So yeah, I think he'll be in one of my teams, and like I say, if Lewandowski fires, someone has to tee him the ball.
It's funny you mentioned that game, because when you look at some of the other highly owned players in it, you see the likes of N'Golo Kante, one of the highest owned players in the game, and we know that he's not a fantasy option. So there is a part of me that thinks with FanTeam, you might have more sort of experienced players playing, because obviously you have to put money in and sort of put your money where your mouth is. But I would still expect there to be people who go for players like that who aren't necessarily good fantasy picks, but they know the name of them. So don't fall into that trap would be my advice to people. Don't go for your Kantes. Make sure every spot is filled with attacking players, especially in midfield and up front.
Is that your golden rule, or are you going to furnish us with another one tonight?
I've got another one for you. Don't worry.
just on Kante, one other thing is that he's a type of player who will get booked. And in the Euro 2016, he was booked twice, which means he was suspended for a game. And that's going to be the same, obviously, ruling for this time. If a player's booked twice, suspended, and you don't want a player out, of any quality, you don't want them out of your side, because it just gives you a headache that you don't need.
I mean, to be fair, that probably is a better golden rule than the rule I've actually got. Don't get N'Golo Kante. Absolutely class player, not so good in fantasy games. Just to quickly touch on my differential that I picked out, I'm going for Emil Forsberg, who plays for Sweden. He's been confirmed by the manager, which is a very rare thing, to be on everything, on every set piece. Penalties, free kicks, corners. He's the absolute sort of heartbeat of that Swedish team. And this is a game that really suits that kind of player. I think he's 5.5 million in the game. So he's someone who I've got in quite a few of my drafts. He's got Spain in the first game, which is obviously difficult, but then better fixtures to come. I think he could be a bit of a left field punt that could do quite well. So competition time. Jake mentioned earlier in the show that we're giving away free entries to the game. And we've been running a competition with our trivia questions for the last 3 episodes. So all you've got to do is answer the following trivia question correctly. Write your answer in the comment section, and we will select one at random, a right answer at random, not just a random answer. Make sure it's right, and we'll give you a free entry to the tournament. So Jake, you stumped us last week, and then I think Belle and I just had that light bulb moment where we were like, "Oh, of course we know who it is." But what's the question this time around?
Question this time is, who scored the opening goal of Euro 2016? A little bit easier, but want to see some more right answers. The clue is he's played over 100 times for his country.
Oh, I feel like I shouldn't. Ben, do you know it?
No. You know what? I went absolutely blank. I was going to try and front that one out and just, play it cool. But I just thought I had too many tells there. Like, I'm not.
And
go away, guys. Think about it and just comment on YouTube afterwards.
Yeah.
And we'll pick one right answer at random.
There'll be people shouting at their computers and phones, listening to us not know it. Don't worry, Ben. I don't know it either. So we're at the golden rule time. So at the end of the episode, we're giving you some golden rules to follow before picking your fan team squad. Ben, you've been good at these. You've had some good ones. What have you got for me today?
I hope this one follows suit. This wasn't my original golden rule, but it came on the back of some news which broke on Monday morning when the Spanish Football Federation confirmed that Sergio Busquets is currently self-isolating after testing positive for COVID. Now, it sounds like a pretty obvious golden rule, but looking ahead, to picking those 15 players, given the current climate and environment and the fact that, COVID is never far away, look to pick 15 starters within your squad. Try to have a deep bench. Try to make those, sure that those players are playing, because if you do have a couple of unforeseen setbacks, and players are missing, what you don't want to be doing in those early rounds is taking, a -4 hit to bring players into your squad. So, like I say, try to plan for every eventuality and, soften the blow if something's to crop up, closer to game day.
I think you almost need to spend more time picking your bench players and your squad players than you do your kind of main picks, because you want to make sure as well, which leads me nicely into my golden rule, which is about planning ahead. And I mentioned having those France players that can come in and just making sure that your players can kind of be switched out with players with a better fixture in that game week 2, because there's no point in having a player with a rubbish game in game week in the game week 2 and then your sub are full of players with a rubbish week in the second game week. You want to make sure that you can kind of switch them and cover them round and rotate them nicely, so you can kind of tap into the fixtures as best you can. So that's where I'm spending most of my time, is around those squad players. So make sure I've got the certain starters like you mentioned, but also making sure that they've got good fixtures as well. Jake?
My golden rule is to roll your transfer in game week 2, because in game week, it looks like in game week 3, it could be that players get rested, teams might already be through. And you might have some selection headaches, there might be some injuries. Just roll that transfer. Make sure you pick that a good first 15, a good first squad. Roll that transfer, gives you the most amount of flexibility. And then, like I say, if like me, you're probably going to choose a bad first 15 as well. It gives you that bit of wiggle room to just make some mistakes better.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried after seeing Josh's 15 that my team isn't as good as his, so it might be.
I think he's going to win it again, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he probably will. Yeah, oh God. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening to FanTeam Daily by Who Scored. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Our final one, I can't believe we've done 4 of these now. Our final show is on Thursday, and this will be a really good one because this will be our own team reveals. So everyone watching can see the squads we've selected and the different strategies we'll be going with. I can't wait to tear apart both of your teams, to be honest. Really looking forward to that. So thank you both, as always, for joining me, and we'll see you then.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
You're watching FanTeam Daily, the podcast by WhoScored.com.